So we're going back on stage again. We're going to be live in the Cork Opera House on March 30th for a very special event, which is going to form part of the Cork Podcast Festival. Our show is called Look Who's Talking. It's going to be all about those criminals. How do we get them into studio? How do we get up close and personal with them? And what have they got to say when the cameras are off? So Cork Opera House, tickets from corkpodcastfestival.ie, 30th of March. See you there.
This is quite a significant story, really, isn't it?
It is, definitely. I mean, I think this is going to the heart of really what criminal activity goes on in this country. Full stop.
And a lot of issues brought up with it. Back to my old favourite, which will be the EncroChat and the lack of movement by Gardaí under the direction of the Commissioner Harris on that.
Yes.
That intelligence. But anyway, so we're here today to talk about Mr. Big, the criminal known as Mr. Big. And we have broken a story, and we're happy to say that he has applied for residency in the United Arab Emirates and he's been refused.
Yeah.
Which is a measure of the fact that we knew he had been spending more time in Dubai. He is, I would say, and declare him on the run now.
Yeah, I think he's determined not to come home, and there's a reason he's determined not to come home, is that the net is closing in on him in a very tight manner surrounding the murder of Robbie Lawlor. He has decided to get out of the country. Like when you go on the run in these circumstances, you don't have to fill out a form and declare yourself on the run. He's just simply attempting not to come home. He's in Dubai, we know, and he will believe that is his final destination, that anywhere in Europe, he's in legal danger.
I mean, his residency approval at one point could have been given the nod by Daniel Kinahan.
Yeah.
Such was his power there, and he still is a powerful enough figure. But obviously he has a lot of favours to call in at the moment, in particular for his friend, ally and right-hand man, Sean McGovern, who is facing extradition back to Ireland for the murder of Noel Duckhead Kerwin. As far as we know, he's still in custody in the Emirates, and we still believe he is going to be back pretty soon.
Yeah.
All going well. But Mr. Big nearly came out with the name there. We would have had to edit that. And there's a reason that we are not naming him, and it's because we are able to talk freer about the circumstances surrounding why he's there. Now, Big obviously has headed up a network of criminals. He has become very powerful over the past 10 years. He has tentacles right into the north and into the west of Ireland, but he has been Irish-based largely. He's had suppliers obviously outside the country, but he's kept himself and his operation in Ireland. He hasn't gone international.
No, and he's been very much on the ground for most of that. I suppose what happened with Mr. Big was he grew up on the north side of Dublin. He came up under serious criminals. He was famously, I suppose, mentored by a tiger kidnapping gang. And he was always, I suppose, for the last 10 years, but probably even longer than that, probably even 15 years, he became, he had his own network. When the Kinahans were at their peak, there were, really a limited number of networks that had that sort of presence on the ground. He really grew in rural Ireland. He obviously had a north side of Dublin base, but he managed to build up this network across the country. And that network started to make an awful lot of money. Some of the people he was associated with would have been linked to Eamon the Dunn's gang, but he had ties all the way through right up into the north. And certainly in recent years, the north of Ireland, he's become, arguably the biggest single supplier, particularly on that border area where there have been a number of very violent feuds occurring.
Now, he has kept close to him a network of really young guys who people would say he's manipulated in a way. I mean, some of them have had tragedy in their past. They have probably, I suppose you could say, lost older relatives to gun violence. He, instead of, bringing them in an effort to sort of help them through life, he has brought them in to work for him as young soldiers, and he has very much manipulated them into doing things for him. I think actually the word manipulation is probably the biggest one that comes out when you're talking about Mr. Big. Anybody who knows him, has dealings with him, and including those investigating him, have recognised that this is somebody who operates on a different level to most. He is constantly second guessing things. He's looking down the road to an end point by manipulating people along the way. He has turned many people against one another, and he has found himself, I suppose, eventually at the centre of this Robbie Lawlor investigation, where he has now disappeared and left. I think the PSNI told the courts in the north that there's at least 20 people who have played a role in it. They know that because of the EncroChat material around it. But all those people are going to be brought before the courts. Will they go after Big, or is he going to ultimately be able to do something in Dubai which will guarantee him his own safety?
Well, I think that's why he's getting out of the country. I mean, that's what we believe. He seems to, according to the background chatter that goes on, that he fears that the Robbie Lawlor case, as it comes to fruition, as that evidence is laid out, that he's in trouble, and in deep trouble. Now, if you look back, obviously one of the reasons that Mr. Big became, I suppose, a household name was the murder of Alan Ryan, the real IRA leader, who would have known Mr. Big growing up. They would have moved in very similar circles. They would have probably shared some sort of childhood friends. So Mr. Big and Alan Ryan, in fact, Alan Ryan who was extorting a lot of criminal figures in particularly in the north side of Dublin, apparently stayed away from the Mr. Big gang because of, not wanting to take him on. But there was at one point some money taken by the real IRA. They basically stopped a drug dealer with, a couple of €100,000, I think was the figure mentioned at the time. And that ultimately was traced back to Mr. Big. Then Alan Ryan, of course, got killed. He got shot dead. Now, if you look back on the reporting of that Alan Ryan murder, it was always one of these, well, Mr. Big is in the background there somewhere. But it was very hard to sort of connect him to anything, because there was all this talk of he had this person do that, and he there was a load of people involved, and he was way away directing it. And he sort of never got to the full, clarity of who did what, really. I mean, obviously, Kenneth Finn ultimately was suspected.
And yet there was always this sort of thing in the ether that Big watched.
Yes.
He was somebody who liked to watch a kill.
Yes, well, basically that he had these, he wanted to see it happen, but that he was a good couple of steps away and was manipulating all these figures all around the place into allowing it to happen. And that apparently included speaking to people in the real IRA in the north ahead of it happening and striking some sort of shady deal that, he'd take responsibility for this killing, but that there'd be no comeback. So there was all of this. Now, 10 years later, or even whatever it is, the Robbie Lawlor murder really follows that same pattern, where there's these sort of random people involved. There seems to be loads of names. It's not as simple as a Mr. Big hitman goes and does something. But I think the difference in the Robbie Lawlor case is, what evidence is there? Is there encrypted messages going on that sort of reveal all? We don't know, but obviously...
Well, we do know, because it was 4 days into the EncroChat phone hack, which obviously Mr. Big and others involved in this shooting weren't aware of at the time. And it appears that they were all, or a lot of them, were very openly chitter-chattering into their phones, sending messages, making plans, and
And if I can say, we do know that one of, and we're not going to be able to name this person because they're facing charges, but a very, very close associate of Mr. Big, who has been based in the north. I mean, we've heard the evidence given in court about how he was using an EncroChat phone. This individual, a very feared individual in his own right. So, that tells its own story, I suppose.
I suppose to briefly just go back over the EncroChat phone hack, which started in April, the beginning of April 2020. That was when we had just got into lockdown, of course. And there was about 2 or 3 months when French and Dutch police were live on this phone network. There was 60,000 of these handsets that had been sold purely to criminals because nobody else seemed to be using them. Criminal gangs all over Europe. And police were able to listen live on those phones, gather intelligence. The intel was gathered through Europol and it was filtered back through the individual countries, including Ireland and Northern Ireland and the UK, who were all part of this. So that information was coming in live. Now, when there was a threat to life situation, and this was a very early threat to life situation that occurred, a decision had to be made whether to move in. Nobody in Europe wanted to blow the fact that there was this live hack going on. I mean, it was a problem. Undoubtedly, it was a problem. But others have spoken in the meantime about when there was, a threat to life situation, they did have to move in. And whether they did that through roadblocks or whatever in order to try and thwart the intelligence they were getting or where it was coming from. But mostly... certainly drug shipments at that time were seized in ports and all the rest of it. Most of the intel was gathered for this collection afterwards, this sweep on Europe's gangland afterwards that has happened and occurred all over all the countries involved except our own, because the Irish under Garda Commissioner Drew Harris made a decision to simply keep the information as intel and not to act on it. There's never been a clear reason for that. I think Harris comes from a background in the north of that secretive policing and that securing that ability for police to be secretive being the overriding and most important part of it. Not to say that was the reason it was done. There possibly was some legal advice that maybe was given at the time that said these cases won't stand up in court. That was given in other jurisdictions in the north of Ireland, in the UK and other places, but they went ahead and there has been huge success. A huge amount of very important organised crime groups have been dismantled. Huge amount of people have gone to jail. Huge amount of people have pleaded guilty because they literally are banged to rights with the evidence when it's allowed into the courts.
Yes.
So that's a situation.
And a huge amount of people who were part of the broader Mr. Big network have pled guilty to EncroChat cases. I mean, we've heard them.
In the north, yes.
In the north. So we've actually, the first case in all of Europe where the EncroChat hack details were revealed was somebody from the Republic. And there's been a number of people through the courts in the north who were being supplied by that Mr. Big network.
And it's interesting because, of course, there was some sort of chatter around Encro initially because we didn't do a press conference. Our Garda Síochána didn't come out and say what successes they'd had because they hadn't. And there was sort of briefings to certain media that there was no reason for the Garda Síochána to move on anything at the time because no Irish criminals used Encro. Yeah. That was the briefing that was put out. Now, we know that the Kinahan network, the Bomber Kavanagh network, used EncroChat because they have been found guilty of well, actually, they've pleaded guilty on a gun plot in the UK, which was totally centred on messages on EncroChat.
Yeah, including Liam Byrne. I mean, God, his name escapes me, his EncroChat handle at the moment, but we know the handles and all. I mean, we've also seen, in relation to the Maurice O'Shea Salazar, we've seen all of those EncroChat messages between all of that gang, many of them, of course, based in Ireland. We've seen them, printed out and, pictured and all. So obviously that doesn't stand up. That because these briefings aren't given on the record as
No.
such. But
So that definitely doesn't stand up.
yeah,
We know Irish
yeah.
criminals did use EncroChat, and that there is material in existence within crime and security, a vast amount of material of intelligence taken during that live hack and presumably afterwards. You'd like to think that now there is some of those intelligence documents are being, sort of distributed amongst the various elite units that they should be.
Yes, and now, of course, even in the UK, they get these messages. They're all EncroChat handles.
Yeah.
It did take a long time, in some occasions, or a significant amount of time, to work out who was who and to be able to nail that down.
Yeah.
But it didn't ever prove impossible. So yeah, look, that's it. But what we do seem to know with Mr. Big is that certainly key members of his organisation were all using EncroChat. We do know that they are the people, that gang are the gang that killed Robbie Lawlor ultimately. And the chatter is that he has felt that the noose is tightening, to use an old classic a newspaper term.
Well, there was some raids done. You see, there's sort of a cross-border cooperation going on in relation to the big network, because there were some raids on his properties and those of his associates last year.
Yeah.
And that seemed to have sort of revealed to him, shall we say, that the PSNI and the gardaí were swapping intelligence and they were probably moving together on him. I mean, if he is charged, he can be charged in the north of Ireland, where he can be put before the courts. He could face a murder charge up there. But you could imagine that he could face similar in the south. So it's double jeopardy for him. He has could a murder charge be levelled against him, or a conspiracy to murder charge, and certainly a directing a criminal organisation here.
Yeah, I mean, it's slightly complicated, I suppose, in that, the murder occurs in the north, so I presume you'd have to be prosecuted in the north for that murder.
The conspiracy could have been hatched in the south, though.
Yeah, which it would have been, obviously.
Yes.
It wasn't hatched on that day. Robbie Lawlor wasn't up in the north all of that time, so there could be a conspiracy charge, and clearly there could be a charge of directing other people to commit a murder, which would be, a very serious charge. So yeah, it's the jurisdiction thing is a slightly complex one but either way, he would face a risk one way or the other. We do know about these raids that, from what we have heard at the time, that the guards looked for the usual stuff in terms of documentation and all of that. But it was reported at the time that a piece of furniture, I believe, was taken. And obviously then, if you listen to some of the cases that have occurred in the EncroChat cases in the UK, you'll hear how these little identifying features, like if somebody took a picture out of their own window, for example, I think there was a case somebody was standing in their bedroom, took a picture of out their window, and that was used to connect that person to that handle.
Yeah.
So there obviously was that suggestion that they're attempting to piece a case together. We don't know, but we do know that he is gone. Now, as I said, he's not formally filed for on-the-run status or something.
What happens to him, though, if he's denied residency there? So we know that he has sort of associates there already. I mean, relatives, shall we say.
Yeah. Who are living there and working there.
And what's his relationship now with Daniel Kinahan? Because there was a point where his partner, Big's partner, and Kiva Robinson were very friendly, and it led to them socialising, particularly when they were out in Spain.
Yeah, I think Big's relationship is no more.
Yeah.
So
his relationship with Kinahan.
No,
do we know? I mean, they're two very manipulative characters, and I'm sure it's a bit of a chaos. It's a bit of a Trump and Vance if they come together. You know what I mean?
Trump and Vance are getting on famously.
Well, I mean, they might get on famously, but
moment.
What could you believe, or what could you not?
Well, I mean, certainly there was that connection through the relationships they were in at the time. I don't think Mr. Big is in that relationship anymore. But what it was said, and who knows, is that Daniel Kinahan wasn't fond of him and thought he wasn't straightforward.
Trustworthy or something.
Something like that.
Okay, that's
wasn't
ironic.
a straightforward. Now, I don't know if that's true.
Maybe they could just see one another or something.
Well, maybe. I mean, maybe
Recognise.
they both want to be
Parts themselves that they didn't like.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they both wanted to be the
Mr. Massive.
the Mr. Very Big.
Yeah.
So look, I mean, who knows? But certainly, while these organisations will all work together at times, you can see in recent times that those networks generally have been quite separate, and Mr. Big wasn't one of the sort of Kinahan clients, I suppose. He certainly was involved in importations that had nothing to do with them, and he certainly sort of controlled areas that they were separate from. So, yeah, look, he's over in Dubai. It depends then. We do know that he is facing very minor charges over here. Those charges would be of a very small nature. It wouldn't be enough to get you extradited from Dubai. So any other charges
will need to be something bigger. I do understand as well, though, that there's information coming in all the time now. It's like it's begun to crumble, that sort of structure that he held. That there's suspicions now that he was involved in certain murders that were sort of framed on other people.
Yeah.
And he seems to be kind of viewed now as one of those individuals, a bit like Kinahan, who would create a narrative. He would convince people to believe him because he's a very convincing character. But the narrative was completely false in order for them to do something else. I'm just thinking even one of the strangest things that Kinahan did was when he, way back, when he convinced Thomas Kavanagh, Bomber Kavanagh, that his own cousin, Hatchet Kavanagh, was going to kidnap one of his children and claim €1 million ransom for the child.
Yeah.
And if Kinahan took him out, would that, that would solve that. And Thomas Kavanagh, Bomber Kavanagh, gave the nod, believed that story.
Yeah.
But just scratch that a little bit on the surface. Hatchet Kavanagh was never going to kidnap one of Bomber Kavanagh's children.
No.
Kidnap is the most high-risk, ridiculously over-complex crime you could ever commit. To make £1 million.
Yeah. I mean, and certainly...
I mean, that would be a lot to me. I don't mean that way. I just mean, you're dealing cocaine, you're dealing drugs. You make £1 million a lot easier and a hell of a lot less risk, and, without actually creating this monstrous enemy for the rest of your days. But yet he convinced him that.
Yeah, and of course Daniel Kinahan then was a mourner-in-chief after the actual murder of Hatchet Kavanagh in Spain. So that shows you the playing both sides, I suppose, that does go on. But yeah, Mr. Big.
But that's a kind of particular personality trait to be able to do that. And they seem to be able to do that and get away with it for a long time. And I suppose we all know manipulative characters in our lives. Our lives aren't really that exciting, but if you took that and put it into that sort of powder keg, which is the underworld and gangland, the paranoia that exists, the secrets that are told, the trust that has to develop between people in order for them to get by. I mean, you've even got a scenario where, is it possible that Big had been feeding intel, directing that through individuals that he had set up to be giving information to the gardaí, because it appears that was very, very possible, and that's something that's been, again, as I say, it's typical when these structures start to collapse, all the information starts coming in, and this kind of picture develops of somebody. It's almost like putting together a jigsaw.
Yeah, look, that's the way he's operated, and I suppose it's unusual in that he's operated like that in the underworld, where he's wanted to have this air of mystery and has certainly mixed people in the middle of it. I mean, the other interesting thing is if he's in Dubai, obviously that's a disadvantage for the state to bring something like a murder charge, because ideally the state want to arrest you. If they suspect you of a murder and they believe they have a very good case, they want to arrest you and put that case to you before they go to the DPP. I mean, that is their preference, because it's just cleaner legally, I suppose. So if you're to charge somebody with murder or something, conspiracy charge. He's gone now, so they don't get a chance to arrest him, put it to him, give him his chance to speak, go through the questioning process, then send a file to the DPP. That would be the preference. But the other matter is this treaty, which I don't think is actually fully formally signed, but will be, will certainly, according to both political sides in Dubai and here, will make all of that a lot easier. So is Dubai the right place?
But of course, that means only if you've got sanctuary, and he hasn't got sanctuary. No. If he's been refused residency. Well, so, does he get?
Well, you can be on a holiday visa, I suppose.
But he has to make sure, because I think the one thing that the Emiratis particularly hate is fraud, weirdly.
Yeah.
So if you have travelled on a false passport, if you have used any false documentation for any applications whatsoever, you're goosed.
Yeah. And of course, if you're on a holiday visa, you've effectively no entitlement to stay if somebody is looking for you. A lot of the issues arise with people who have residency. Obviously, with Daniel Kinahan, it'd be very different because he'll have businesses, homes, all of that. And that will certainly, if he was to come before a court in Dubai for extradition, that would stand in his favour. Somebody else could just be kicked out because their holiday visa is up.
Yeah, and they don't want it.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll be back to this story, I can tell you.
We will be back with naming Mr. Big maybe someday soon.
Who knows?
Robbie Lawlor was out of control.
This is Double Cross, the murder of Robbie Lawlor.
It was going to be an all-out war with him in the middle of it.
A Crime World special investigation podcast based on my new book, Web of Betrayal, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.